In this slidecast, we're going to look at revenue streams. Revenue streams show how your business model captures value. It's the outcome of the front stage of your business model, the value you offer to the market. Let's define revenue streams. Revenue streams is how you earn money from a particular customer segment. It shows how your business model captures value in return for the value you create for customers. And it's an outcome of your choices you make in the front stage of the business model. And of course, revenues should always be bigger than the cost structure. Now that seems obvious, but with the business model canvas, you can show it on one page. Now let's look at the different type of revenue streams. We'll start with asset sales. Asset sales generate revenues from the transfer of ownership rights, and that could be of a tangible product or it could be an intangible product. So the car industry is a great example. They sell millions of cars every year. Let's look at this on the business model canvas. So you have an asset as a key resource that's packaged around a value proposition. The value proposition is offered to the buyer, and the buyer pays a sales fee in exchange for the asset, and the rights of the ownership are transferred. This is important to understand because this is a transactional revenue, which means you have to sell again and again and again. Here's a different type of revenue stream, rental fees. In rental fees, the revenues are generated by temporarily granting someone the exclusive right to use a particular asset. So in the car business, we very well know the rental fees. Let's look at this on the business model canvas. So again, you have an asset, which is a key resource. And here, the value proposition is the rental of the asset. That is offered to the renter, and the renter pays a rental fee in exchange for this value. Now, the interesting thing here is that the asset remains property of the organization, and the asset then produces recurring revenues. So let's look at a slightly different type of revenue stream, usage fees. In usage fees, the revenues are generated by the use of a particular service. And here's the particularity. Well, the more you use the service, the more you're going to pay. So in the car business, we get usage fees from taxis. Let's look at this on the business model canvas. So as a key resource, you will have a service producing asset, and the service is the value proposition offered to the buyer. The buyer will pay a usage fee, which is metered, and the more you use, the more you pay. Now what's interesting here is, again, the asset remains property of the organization and it produces recurring revenues. Here's a very different type of revenue stream, licensing fees. So in licensing fees, the revenues are generated by giving customers the permission to use an intellectual property in exchange for a licensing fee. So in the car business, or in the technology business in general, licensing fees generate revenues from intellectual property that you'll find in a lot of products. On the business model canvas, this is how it would look. As a key resource, you have an intellectual property. The value proposition is the permission to use this intellectual property. That is offered to the licensee, and the licensee will pay a licensing fee for using this intellectual property. Again, of course, the intellectual property remains property of the organization, but here's where it gets really interesting. It produces recurring and very scalable revenues. Here's another very popular revenue stream, advertising fees. In advertising fees, the revenue is generated for giving visibility to a particular product, service, or brand, or any other item. In the car business, we could imagine advertising on the taxis. How does this look in the business model canvas? So as a key resource, you'll have two things. You'll have the advertising channel and you'll have the audience. That is packaged as a value proposition, and the value proposition is basically the access to the audience, which is offered to an advertiser. And the advertiser pays an advertising fee for this access to the audience. So again, the channel remains property of the organization, but you also need an audience which is sizable and has a very good quality. Otherwise, you can't generate advertising fees. Here's another type of revenue stream, subscription fees. So here the revenues are generated by selling continuous access to a service. So in the car business, we might think of magazines. On the business small canvas, this is how it would look. As a key resource, you have an asset that is offered as a service to the customers who are the subscribers, and the subscribers pay a subscription fee. Again here, very interesting, this produces recurring and often very predictable revenue streams. And let's look at the last revenue stream, brokerage fees. This is very different. Here the revenues are generated from an intermediation service, and this is performed between two or more parties. In the car industry, we might imagine an insurance broker who brokers the relationship or the transaction between two parties, the insurer and the driver. In the business small canvas, this is how it will look. You'll have a seller and you'll have a buyer, and the value proposition is the intermediation service. And for that service, the intermediator will get a brokerage or transaction fee from either one party, the other party, or both. And what you'll often see is that one revenue stream may be subsidizing the other one. Now let's look at pricing mechanisms. This is different from revenue streams. This is how the price is established, and a pricing mechanism is tied to a revenue stream. There are different pricing mechanisms, and basically you have two categories. It's either static, where the price is fixed in advance, or dynamic, where the price is fixed on the spot. We'll start with static menu pricing, where the price is fixed in advance. When you sell cars, you probably have a list price that is fixed in advance. And a car price depends on the number of features you put in a car. The more features there are, the higher the price. But again, here the feature price is fixed in advance. Then of course, if you buy 10 cars, it will be cheaper than if you buy one car. And maybe the price is segment dependent. So it doesn't seem obvious that the same car can be sold at a different price to one segment or to another. But imagine if you're selling in one country or another country where the purchasing power is different, the price will also vary, but you'll fix the price in advance. Now dynamic pricing, where the price is based on immediate market conditions. The oldest pricing mechanism possible is negotiation. So here there's a discussion and adaptation of the price between two or more parties. And very important, the price will depend on the negotiation power and the negotiation skills of one or the other party. A place where you find this price is in flea markets. Or on the other hand, on the very other side of the spectrum, you'll have industrial goods. The higher the price, the more likely it is that the price is negotiated. Here's a very different pricing mechanism. Yield management, very interesting. Now here the price depends on the inventory and the time of the purchase. This is mainly applied in areas where you have perishable resources. What do I mean with that? Airline seats. Once a flight has taken place, the seat is worthless, so it perishes. So airlines sell the seats based on the number of seats available and the time of the purchase. So if you buy much in advance, or if you buy a day before the flight takes place, you'll pay a very, very different price. Another area where yield management applies is in the hotel industry. Of course, once a night has taken place, the hotel room can't be sold anymore. It's sold the next night. So hotels will use yield management to optimize the selling of their rooms, or to optimize the price of the rooms. And then, of course, you have real-time market pricing. Here the price is established dynamically in real time based on supply and demand. Now this pricing mechanism really only works if you have a lot of buyers, a lot of sellers, and a large volume of transactions. And what comes to mind, of course, is the stock market, where you have dynamic pricing. Then we'll finish here with the auction mechanism. Here the price is determined by the outcome of a competitive bidding. Now this is what turned Google into a very successful company. Rather than just selling the advertising, different advertisers compete for the search terms. They participate in automated auctions, which drives the price up and which turn Google into a very, very wealthy company. Let me finish with a modeling mistake that I often see that seems obvious but isn't obvious. You really got to make sure that you clearly define who is paying and for what people are paying or organizations are paying. Avoid the orphan revenue streams. What I mean with this is that I often see people sketching out a business model, for example, free services sold through the web to users, and this will be financed through advertising. The mistake here is that advertising is an orphan revenue stream because it's not the users who are paying for advertising, and the users are not paying advertising for a free service. In fact, the business model should look very different. You should have a free revenue stream and one from advertising, and that is paid by advertisers for a very particular value proposition. This is very important because the business model can only work if you have two segments and a value proposition, a clear value proposition to both segments. So make sure you think hard about the right revenue stream and the right pricing mechanism because it can make a huge difference. And don't hesitate, experiment with different possibilities. Class dismissed.